Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in today's lesson, we're going to be discussing how you can cultivate a personal relationship with divinity. Now, this is something we personally regard to be the single most essential element in a spiritually uplifting life, in spiritual life. And the tragedy of our times, we feel, is that the majority of even so-called Christians have no relationship with the one they allegedly worship. Now, if you walk into a random any church, your nearest church, just by sheer proximity, and walk into it any Sunday, regardless of the preacher's belief, the odds are that they encourage the perception that God is dead, yet the skillful preacher will make it known to the audience that God is not only alive, but present in their midst. So this is something that belongs to every believer. It's a really democratic promise to be maintained. We are told that we can know divinity, and he can be a personal guide, comfort, and friend. And one of the most frequent forms of persecutions I've personally experienced is being told that I have an imaginary friend. But the thing about God is that he is on a metaphysically higher plane than anything that can be imagined. So you have to prepare to abandon your imagination and your own faculties, but God can be known accurately, and we recommend that accurate and well-rounded study of his attributes are necessary for more spiritually advanced believers, but a relationship is the minimum to be cultivated amongst even baby believers. So we're going to open with, we're going to cover a few verses in Scripture today, the opening of which is going to be Deuteronomy 4:29, which reads, "But from there you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, and shall find, when you search for him with all your heart and all your being." So this is Moses, of whom we read had a more intimate exposure and access to Yahweh than he was informed that it would be on an unduplicated extent. He's telling the nation of Israel that they too can have what he has, which is an intimate access and knowledge of divinity in an experiential relationship. But there are certain conditions with this to meet this, and that is to engage all your faculties and all their capacities. So you got to really surrender and sacrifice the totality of your mind, heart, spirit, and soul in order to find him. And the implications of this message are twofold. One, Yahweh can be known, and two, he wants to be known, but he can't be known unaided. So as the author of theology, he is authorized to describe the components which collectively formulate the broader whole. But this principle is reiterated by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 29, verses 13 and 14, which reads, "And you shall seek and shall find me when you search me with all your heart. And I shall be found by you, declares Yahweh, and I shall turn back your captivity, and shall gather you from all the Gentiles, and from all the places where I have driven you, declares Yahweh, and I shall bring you back to the place from which I have exiled you." So several centuries later, Jeremiah is reiterating much the same concepts. These were to a nation that was preparing on the verge of going into captivity, but the assurance that Yahweh can be known remains inviolate. So they would be estranged from the promised land on account of their forsaking of the covenant, yet they could still be known in Babylon. And one of the unexpected positive outcomes of the Babylonian captivity is that it more or less thoroughly purged their idolatrous inclination. So they had to spend some time away from the blessings in order to lay hold of the greater blessings. And there is no blessing or treasure on earth that can possibly be measured to an engaging, active relationship with Elohim. And the next verse we're going to read is Colossians 1, verses 9 and 10. And this is Paul writing, "That is also why we, from the day we heard, have not ceased praying for you, and asking that you be filled with the knowledge of his will, in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, to walk worthily of the Master, pleasing all, bearing fruit in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of Elohim." So that he was addressing the Colossians, and he had an intimate investment in their well-being, so much so that he daily prayed throughout the day on their behalfs with them in mind. And his great prayer was for them to know the will of the Father. And this can be known. We read in verses such as Acts 22:14 and Ephesians 5:17 that it is Paul calls the believer to understand the will of the Father, but more broadly, the Father himself, spiritual understanding and the knowledge of Elohim is his fervent prayer. So he has a relationship with divinity, and his burning desire is to share what he has. And I personally wouldn't be here unless I knew that God was real, and I wanted you to share the fact that you can have a relationship with him that will be enriching beyond measure. And the next verse we're going to read are Job 37, 5 through 14. These are the words of Elihu. He is the youngest of Job's comforters in that book. And we're going to read verses 5, 14, 23, and 24. And it reads, El thunders wondrously with his voice, doing great deeds, which we do not understand. Listen to this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wonders of El. The Almighty, we have not found him out. He is exalted in power, in justice, in great in righteousness. He does not oppress. Therefore men fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in heart. So Elihu is describing the Almighty, the Yahweh, as a mysterious being. Now the depths of what can be known of him are impossible to penetrate, at least this side of mortality, but it was perhaps not meant to known. So he remains an enigma and a riddle wrapped in a mystery. Yet he does dole out specific information about himself for our benefit, which we can know. But it suffices to say that he is exalted in power and justice and does not oppress, and that is why men fear him. But he does not regard any who are wise of heart, so we have to forsake not only our illusion of wisdom, but our conception of wisdom, if we are to find out the one whose wisdom transcends wisdom itself, and from which all wisdom finds its fulfillment and origin in. And the next verses are going to be Psalm 37:7, and it reads, Rest in Yahweh, and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man doing wicked devices. So the challenge of knowing Elohim is when we are in the midst of struggles and problems in the life. We have to contend with the fact that the majority of the rest of the entire world does not regard what we regard to be priceless, that being the knowledge of divinity. But rest that demands a waiting, and resting is required, and it is the other side of the rest and work are not opposites, but supplementary components of the same equation, which all are divine in origin and authorization. And wait patiently, that means you're not going to find out everything you'd like to know right away, but it does demand diligence, so don't let the doubts or questions or dilemmas or challenges you encounter in the course of seeking a greater understanding of divinity be a roadblock for you. They can be detours which are incidental to the quest, but the moments of doubt for the saints are not defeats but detours. And we can take our doubts or questions to Yahweh, who will answer us, because we do have the promise in the prayer for wisdom will not go unanswered in James 1:5. And the next verse we're going to read is Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am Elohim. I am exalted among nations. I am exalted in the earth. So from this stillness springs the awareness of that Elohim is and who Elohim is, and his supremacy amongst the human nations are frankly declared, and it extends across the whole earth. But the more specifically relevant to our intended lesson is that a stillness is required to know Elohim. So we cannot find him, and we should not seek him in the commotion of the world, but should seek solitary contemplation, make time for solitary contemplation, because the stillness, the tranquility of body and soul is necessary to know all that we can know about Elohim. And the final verse we're going to close on is 1 John 2:3, and it reads, "And by this we know that we know him, if we keep his commands." So obedience is an organ of spiritual knowledge, and at the conclusion of Ecclesiastes, we find Solomon offering his conclusion on the meaning of life, which, after his pursuit of wisdom, is all well and good and not to be discouraged, but it's no substitute for a life of obedience. And John, in this verse, claims that our knowledge of divinity can manifest and develop and germinate through obedience. So the most foolish obedient person is, in the final analysis and at the end of the day, wiser than the wisest rebel. And most rebels are, of course, not aware that they are rebels. It is a subconscious but intrinsically rooted state of mind, which is man. And our state of rebellion causes us to neglect the pursuit of the knowledge of the Almighty. And Adam, the original rebel, when he was he had an intimate access with Elohim. He was literally the first created, and the knowledge of divinity passed from his testimony to his progeny. And throughout periodic intervals of history, Yahweh reveals himself spectacularly to certain prophets. We read Moses caught a guarded glimpse of him, yet he does reveal himself daily and in countless ways. So it is really incumbent upon the spiritually attuned believer to tune their antenna to the manifestations of Elohim in our daily life, which will add meaning, purpose, and direction to that life. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.